Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
On a global scale, data from the World Bank shows that the global gig economy accounts for up to 12% of the labor market, which is much higher than the previous estimates for the total number of gig workers. Now it's pretty evident that the gig economy is growing. With the rise of the gig economy, more and more individuals are turning to freelance, contract, or temporary work arrangements. As this trend continues to gain momentum, it's becoming increasingly important to explore the intricacies of compensation within this sector. So before we begin, let me introduce myself. I'm your host, Sanjeevani Saikia, and in today's episode of the Vantage Influencers Podcast, we have with us Parvathy Menon. Through this conversation, she will help us understand the compensation trends in the gig economy in depth. So let's get started. Hi, Parvathy.
Hello, Sanjeevani.
Hi, it's great to have you here with us today. Before we dive into today's topic, compensation trends in the gig economy, I'd love to hear a bit about your professional journey so far. So can you share some highlights from your corporate journey?
Hello, I'm Parvathy. I'm an HR practitioner currently specializing in compensation. I help companies around the globe to design and implement their compensation strategies. I have close to 14 years of experience in HR, and over the years, I have delved into almost all the areas within HR. I'm also an independent researcher. I do a lot of studies on human behaviors.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your corporate journey with us. Really appreciate it. With your permission, I'd like to begin today's conversation.
Sure, please.
Great. As you must have observed, the gig economy has witnessed significant shifts in how workers are compensated, from the traditional hourly salaried pay structures to more dynamic and flexible models such as pay per task or performance based compensation. There's a continuous evolution that is being witnessed. So, as we dive into our conversation today, I'm curious about the key shifts you have observed in compensation trends within the gig economy, and how do you see these changes impacting both workers and employers?
Absolutely. You said it very right. The gig economy is evolving tremendously. And some of the reports that we get to see is awe-striking. The McKinsey report I read some days back, the 2022 report, it estimates the market size to reach around $8.53 trillion by 2030. And then even within India, NASSCOM study states, the market size of gig economy is going to touch $455 billion by 2025. So the numbers are huge. It's going to be around 43% of the total US workforce. So gig economy is not something which anyone can ignore, and because of that, there is a lot of changes and improvements that are happening within different platforms, the compensation models, the regulatory landscapes. Everywhere you can see a lot of advancements these days. As you rightly said, in the past, the compensation models used to be like pay per gig. For a project you get some payment,
Yes.
or it was an hourly based pay or something like that. But now there has been a lot of diversifications. You also touched upon few of that. One is a performance based pay. We
Yes.
also have skill based pricing. Rates are different for premium skills or hot skills in the market. And even the hourly rate system, that is not just standard hourly rates, it is dynamic pricing. It changes based on many contexts. Then we also have seen subscription based pricing and hiring happening in different platforms. Some of the platforms are managed and run by workers themselves, where they end up doing revenue sharing also. So there have been a lot of changes, very good improvements on the compensation side. And on the platform side also, we are seeing a lot of shifts. Platforms are turning out to be more and more transparent in terms of their payment. They are accommodating more flexibility. So these are some things which are very welcoming, and with some um, well-being of workers in mind. So good progresses and good changes. And some of the platforms we can also see, they are offering limited healthcare, PTOs. Some countries even are experimenting on pension schemes. So all these are tagged to platforms these days. That way the platforms are also forthcoming to experiment with these kind of changes. And technological shift is anyway there. AI is all over, and that is influencing the gig economy and gig platforms also. You would see rewarding is through some of the digital platforms, then AI based pricing or AI enabled pay calculations, mobile wallets, point systems, reward point system, I meant. So all these changes on the technological side also is something which we get to see these days. And finally, we also see a lot of improvements on the regulatory front. The unions are working, the workers' unions are working for it, government is working for it, and the platforms are also equally contributing to it, by which there are a lot of improvements on the regulatory front as well. Uh, in a few years back, we would have heard about situations where you put up some work of yours or you share your work, but it was not very uncommon that you don't get paid for it. Gig workers always had that kind of issues, but nowadays it's highly regulated. We have seen many lawsuits against platforms for unfair pay practices, or even for not giving a transparent payouts, etc., etc.
Yes.
And governments across the globe are also striving to classify gig workers very specifically. They are not being defined very clearly at this point in time everywhere, but many countries are coming with a clear definition for gig workers. They are also trying to ensure some minimum wages, some kind of benefits like social security benefits, all those things. So that way things are improving very very well, and all these shifts shaped by diverse aspects are going good for the overall gig economy.
Interesting. Again, it's pretty evident that the gig economy has largely disrupted traditional employment paradigms. And it's fascinating to see how compensation models are adapting. Earlier, hourly wages and annual salaries were the sole matrix of payment. But now we are seeing the emergence of models like pay for performance or revenue sharing arrangements for that matter.
Right.
So it would be interesting to know from you, what innovative compensation models have you encountered that are gaining traction within the economy?
Mm.
And how do you envision these models shaping the future of work?
Yep. So, see, the very nature of a gig economy or gig workers is uh, they love freedom, they love flexibility, and they cannot be structured into one size fit for all model, right? When companies also look for compensating employees differently, maybe based on some demographics or based on certain groups, they also are trying to compensate employees differently. How they are paid is based on certain factors that are relevant to that group. So there is a flexibility in a structured organization itself. So gig economy cannot be any different, and they need it more than a structured organization. And shifting from a fixed structure to a flexible structure is something which is essential also for a growing economy like that of a gig economy. Traditional notions of compensation like pay per gig or a standard hourly wages or salaries are definitely going through an overhaul. And I myself has seen a lot of changes in the whole way people are structuring their pay. Even the platforms are structuring their pay quite differently. So some of the things that we are already experiencing is our ride shares. We see how the surge prices and how even a food delivery app charges you more during peak hours. So all these are with a with an vision to uh, pay the workers also more, compensate the workers more for the kind of effort that they do during peak hours or during some specific context or conditions. They want them to work more, motivate them. That is why we also experience a surge price during some peak hours. So that is part of every one of our most of our lives these days. And another thing is skill based pricing is becoming very prominent and prevalent because any platform you open, you will see people are classified based on their skills. The job requirements or the opportunities are also listed based on skills. So that is something which is I think has become very fundamental nowadays. It is not something that we can live without. And hot skills and premium skills are anyway at a higher rate than normal ones. And performance based incentive is something which is getting traction when you complete a milestone, or when you complete a project certain within certain timelines or early parameters that the client or the platform has decided. Based on that performance bars, you get certain kinds of incentives, additional incentives. Or you will be, or the worker can get paid based on different tiers of compensation. That again will be based on certain criteria, like early completion or milestone based achievements, etc., etc. And revenue sharing, we spoke about it. There are many worker collectives that are owning platforms, and these are there are platforms that are owned and run by workers themselves. So they do a revenue sharing model in that. And some platforms also allow workers to partner with them, and then share a percentage of their revenue with the workers. So that is one another trend. Then one more interesting trend I have come across is the subscription models. So what these platforms do is they offer subscription based access to a pool of skilled workers. So with that, the clients are paying a regular fee for some guaranteed service. So these platforms keep these workers, and the clients can pay some money as a subscription amount, and then use these services. So these services are guaranteed for them. That is something which is gaining traction, but quite useful if you want undisrupted services. And another thing which we come across, if somebody is using GitHub and all that, you will be familiar. Tokenization is something which is already in practice, but not every platform utilizes it. But we think that is something very innovative and useful. What happens is gig workers do not get a chance to create wealth in the long term unless regular salaried employee. So a regular salaried employee has options like long-term incentives, stocks, ESOPs, etc., etc., where they have an opportunity to create wealth for themselves. But a gig worker hardly gets that kind of an opportunity. But tokenization is something which is useful from that front. What some of these platforms are doing, they reward the workers or the platform users. Uh, based on some tokens, and that tokens can be cryptocurrencies or any tokens that they have a digital reward of any kind with some value. And some of them can have potentially higher value uh, while exchanging their earnings. So when it is exchanged in the market like a cryptocurrency, they can fetch higher value. So that can potentially be a wealth creation opportunity for a gig worker also. So these are the some of the latest trends. And other trends is of course some platforms offering minimum wage guarantee, certain earning guarantee, etc., etc. So DoorDash, if you see DoorDash, there is a Dasher guarantee where the person is committed, the worker is committed certain amount of earning in certain time frame. And if the person is not earning, the DoorDash platform is topping up that amount, whatever is less, is topped up by DoorDash, so that that commitment is met, so that problem of minimum wage is solved there. So some platforms are coming up with that as well. Then one another trend is some people they do not want to wait for a long period to get paid. So what they expect is the platform divides the whole project or the task into micro projects or micro tasks, and they be paid after completion of all these micro tasks. So they don't have to wait for long. And this is also useful for people who have a problem with a long term commitment of to a work or anything like that. So that is also there. So in a nutshell, uh, everything possible has been thought through to address the variability and flexibility requirements of a gig economy, and it is constantly evolving based on the needs.
Interesting. You have touched upon something really critical here, that is tokenization. Now, regarding that, like, are organizations educating their gig workers regarding this tokenization? Because now this is a big opportunity for gig workers that they can create their wealth,
Yep.
which they do not generally get the opportunity for. So, like, what initiatives are companies taking to educate them? Are they really doing that in the first place?
Yes. Right. So, see, this is a requirement for them also to know, any reward for that matter is to motivate an employee to do more or to influence certain behaviors. That is the fundamental of any rewards. So, tokenization is no different. When a platform is offering a certain reward, it can be tokens also. The purpose of that is to get certain work done or certain influence certain behaviors of that worker. So they definitely are taking all measures to make people understand how it is being useful for them in the long run, and how they can earn more out of it with no caps. So they are not keeping any caps to it, unlike in a salaried environment there is no cap to what you can earn. So that way it is a win-win for both, and companies are taking measures to educate people around it. Now, it is not very prevalent in all types of platforms. Majorly, we have seen it only on technology related platforms. So, when it comes to low skilled environment, it is not very prevalent. So, that may be the reason it is not much talked about, but it is, I think it will also gain a momentum, and there is no reason why it cannot be a mainstream rewarding system.
Okay. Now, to attract and retain gig workers while balancing cost efficiency, I'm sure companies are exploring unique compensation structures.
Yeah.
It would be good, Parvati, if you could share some examples of companies that have implemented unique compensation structures to incentivize gig workers effectively, and help us understand how do these structures contribute to both worker satisfaction and organizational success.
Yeah. So one thing that has been successful is what we see, the dynamic pricing that all our share cabs and delivery systems and partners uses. So that is purely a very creative way to address their business problem, at the same time motivating employees to commit to tackle that business problem. If the worker is putting out an extra effort to meet certain business demands, they are adequately compensated for that. So that is a very fair way of compensating or structuring the compensation. So when we look from the point of view of a compensation professional, I would see how they have structured it is very creative and very fair. You're giving something for what you are taking extra. You're giving extra for what you're taking extra. So very fair and balanced way, and that is one. And then other unique things are skill based multipliers. So we already spoke about how skill based compensation is almost very prevalent now, but there are some companies that use a skill as a multiplier. So when I say multiplier is nothing but an accelerator, you will be when you are enrolled as a worker in a platform, and you share your work with them or to the client through them, you get paid for xyz commitment. But uh, they also add a skill based multiplier, so that there is an x amount of increase in your rate. So if you are a very hot skilled worker, your skills can fetch you a premium. So that is another way of structuring the compensation to the benefit of the worker. And some platforms also run games and contests and leaderboards and all that. And all these are paid with virtual rewards and points, digital rewards. So these digital rewards can be converted. And then they can utilize it to say buy something or etc, like the Vantage platform, that your Vantage platform itself is something that many platforms are tied to, is what I heard, where Vantage points can be utilized to purchase something else. So these were not something which was regular in the past, where somebody is given some extra points for achieving something out of their commitment. But these are becoming very popular these days. It's nothing new, but it has to gain traction across platforms. That's the only thing that we have to wait and see. But otherwise, it's already implemented in many platforms. And then guaranteed minimum hours income, or subscribing to a number of work hours. All these are things that people are doing these days, or not very prevalent, but many companies have started experimenting with it. Some governments, like the government of Germany and New Zealand, they have started 3 years, 5 years pilot programs to see how these things are spanning out. So minimum wages, ensuring minimum wages, structuring the compensation in such a way that the worker will earn certain amount of money for so many hours of commitment. So these are things that are gaining momentum. And they also provide some non-cash incentives and bonuses, like uh, if you are a star worker or a very loyal worker to that platform, they are given some micro insurance or limited time health insurance, flexibility of timings or time off options, fuel vehicle maintenance, discounts. So these are some non-cash incentives also that are provided or being structured into their compensation to motivate them. So uh, again, I would say people are getting very creative in order to see how they can incentivize each employee based on their requirements and their context of their work or demography or age or whatever. But while all these are good, flexibility, tailoring compensation to the needs of the worker or employees, everything is very good. That's all with a very fair intent. But that can also lead to some unfair practices, because nobody knows what is the trend. When everybody is paid uniquely, you don't have a trend, and you don't know if you are being paid or compensated fairly or not.
Yeah.
So those are things which government should come up with proper regulatory measures. While we welcome any kind of structures that can suit your personal requirements, it should also ensure that the person is not being milched, and or he or she is being unfairly compensated. Because some of the studies we see, there is a wage gap between different genders even now, even in gig economy. So you can imagine what kind of unfairness can creep in if there are no regulatory measures, if we also push for very tailored compensation structure for everybody.
True. That's well said. That's very well said. It's interesting that within the gig economy, compensation trends vary across different roles and industries. For instance, rideshare drivers might prioritize hourly earnings, while freelance consultants may value project based fees.
Yep.
Now, despite variations, I believe overarching strategies such as fair pay
Mm.
and transparent compensation practices remain paramount across the board. So, how do you see compensation trends differing among various roles within the gig economy? And are there any common challenges that workers and employers face when ensuring fair compensation? Something I think this is going to be an extension of what you've previously mentioned. But yeah, how would you like to go about with that?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of your question, how do we differentiate the pay? Everything boils down to how we classify them. Uh, you know, gig workers can have different categories. So, to what granularity you can classify them, segment them, will ensure the right kind of compensation for each segment. Broadly, I would take example of say you said the example of
Yes, share driver.
drivers to a freelance consultant.
True.
So we can divide them or segregate them into roughly three categories. One can be a very low skilled manual task segment. Then there can be a medium skilled or a service oriented segment, like a virtual assistant or content creators. The role complexity is there compared to a low skilled role, but it is not as complex as a strategy consultant who will be an advisory to the CXOs.
True.
So there they will be considered in a high skilled or an expert role category. So all these three can be easily segregated, and their compensation also can be tailored based on to their context. So, for example, a delivery person or somebody who is running errands, uh, what is the complexity in their role? There isn't much. So they are mostly evaluated based on the time taken to finish certain task or the distance they would have covered. These are some of the primary criteria applicable to them, and there is very limited room for negotiations. These are all very set criteria, nothing more you can think about there. But when it comes to a medium skilled or a service oriented category, as I took the example of a virtual assistant or so, they cannot be paid based on time or distance, etc. That's the parameters completely changes there. They have to be they have to be compensated for their skills, what they bring onto table, what differently that they can do to influence certain business problems. So these are the things they will be evaluated on, and they will be compensated accordingly. Some of the skills or certifications that they hold can add value, can give them a premium, which that kind of premium cannot be applied to a low skilled manual task holder. For them, an extra reward point will be maybe some good reviews from the customers, or they are given higher rates during peak hours, etc., etc. Those are their kind of extra reward points. For a mid-skilled workers, as I told you, skills or certifications can give them extra. Now, when it comes to high skilled or expert roles, none of these are going to matter. Of course, they will be mostly paid based on projects, but the scope and complexity of that project will be the key differentiator. And for such kind of roles, I'm taking the example of a strategy consultant to a CXO. There, the personal reputation also plays a crucial role. So somebody will have a higher rate just because of their reputation in the market.
Mm-hmm.
He or she may be doing the same job. Two people may be doing the same job and equally competent when you evaluate them, but how they get selected to a very critical project completely depends on their personal reputation. So that is very important.
Interesting.
So just expertise will not help in that role. So they get compensated for that also. The trust they bring, the CXO level assignments requires a lot of trust. So that also plays a crucial role in deciding their compensation.
I guess that's more about the brand value that a person holds.
Absolutely, yes. So when you are a gig worker, this is something which every gig worker should ensure, that their brand value, personal reputation is something which they should maintain. All these platforms allow maximum reviews, and you can showcase your work, etc., etc. So all these are ways that you can improve your personal branding. So very important, and useful in the long term.
Parvati, I'm sure you know gig workers are increasingly advocating for access to healthcare, retirement plans, and other traditional employment benefits. And somewhere this advocacy reflects a broader societal conversation about the rights and protections afforded to all workers, regardless of their employment arrangement. Now, how do you see gig workers advocating for fair compensation packages? And more importantly, what steps can companies take to address these concerns while maintaining the flexibility inherent in the gig economy?
Yeah. So at many levels, this gig workers are advocating for fairness in terms of compensation or benefits. So at an individual level, they can negotiate with the platform for better payments and transparent payouts, and also some of the insurances and protections like that. That is at an individual level. They can do some negotiation. They can also diversify their income streams. As we discussed before, they can secure some positive reviews and build a strong reputation for themselves. These are some things that they can do at an individual level, and I would strongly recommend all gig workers to do all these. Now, when it comes to a larger landscape, we see there are a lot of traction around unionization of gig workers. There are so many unions and collectives and associations that are coming up, which are constantly pushing and enabling these gig workers to bargain collectively for all their needs, with maybe that can be with the government or any platforms, or it can be anything. But that collective bargaining power is growing in the gig economy, that nobody can ignore. Now with that, there is a lot of push on the legislative and regulatory part. The gig worker groups are lobbying for reforms, regulations. We also saw some lawsuits are taken against some platforms. So all these are made possible today with their collective action, and this is how they are, advocating for their rights and well-being. Again, social media is playing its own good part. There are they run online campaigns to push for legislative changes, or any kind of demands they want to achieve. So all these things, online campaigns are also helping them out. So different ways the workers are coming together for their common purposes. So that's how things are shaping.
Okay. You have mentioned about demographic factors earlier, but I'd like to delve a little deeper again. So, gig workers in high demand urban areas may command higher rates than those in less populated regions. Similarly, specialized skills, as you have mentioned, often translates into like higher earning potential. So, how do you perceive geographic and demographic factors influencing compensation trends within the gig economy? And are there any disparities worth highlighting in different regions or demographics? This is something that you have already mentioned, but regarding the disparity that is there, and that is one of the primary concern in the gig economy. So could you kind of like elaborate more on this?
Yep. So the demographies and various other factors like location, skills, everything can create a difference in the compensation. So, for example, you rightly said urban versus rural. The urban workforce gets paid more than the rural workforce. That's primarily because the cost of living index of an urban area is more than a rural area, as everyone knows it. And platforms, as a result of that cost of living difference, are paying more in a urban area than a rural area. Another thing is the demand. For example, cabs, the demand for cabs or delivery apps, etc., are more in an urban setup than a rural setup. So when the demand is more, obviously the workers are benefited more in an urban setting. So that is how the geographies are playing a part. And then there are also supply demand difference. Some areas, if the availability of gig workers for a certain skill or a role is more, then the rates will come down because the demand supply is more than the demand. So that again can affect. Then that is when, as I highlighted before also, some of the countries, not prevalent in India, some of the countries are taking measures to ensure that the gig workers are given some, or protected with some minimum wages, and that becomes some kind of a mandate for them, for some of the platforms in certain countries. It's not prevalent in India though. Then skill based differentiation we already saw. We went in depth into it. And another thing to add into that is a platform reputation, right? So some platforms, uh, they will specialize in certain skills. In that way, they offer a higher rate to certain skill set of people who they want to retain or attract the workers. And those workers, if they are attached to that platform, will earn more compensation than with somebody who is not attached to platform but with a similar skills. So that is a, platform based differentiation that we can see. Again, that is also basis their skills. And another thing, this is particularly applicable for all the low skilled category, where when the demand surges, when it is a seasonal fluctuation, a holiday season, or something like that, they get a higher price. But compared to other, if there are holiday seasons, they get more pay, more wages, but no other than the normal timings. And then there are some platforms that run time sensitive tasks. So what happens is when the task is time sensitive, somebody has to put in extra efforts to meet that commitment, and they come with a higher charge. So time also plays a role here. That's a criteria to decide how much extra you get. And then when you're talking about urban versus rural, we see that urban counterparts are anyway they have more awareness, they have more exposure to these kind of platforms than in rural. Not every platform is geo inclusive. So, that way people who are ready to or with the same skill set may not get that kind of opportunity in a rural area when compared to an urban setup. So these kind of disparities are definitely there, and as I highlighted before, age and gender are also we are seeing a lot of disparity. Wage difference of men and women even in gig economy is noteworthy. There is a certain gap in wages. Women there are also paid lesser than men. That is what studies say. And in terms of age, also, the younger population is paid more than the older population. So that again is something not very good, because if the payout or the compensation is based on certain skills or performance or achievements, then these factors, these variables like age, gender, location, this should not come into picture. The platform should be uh, you know location agnostic or demography agnostic or gender agnostic. It cannot restrict compensation based on these things. Geography, to a large extent, I agree, because if the service source is not required, we can't offer that service in that location. But gender and age is something which we should not allow to creep into our whole system. And then another thing that we have noted is the cultural differences. So, cultural norms and regulations can vary significantly between countries, and that can influence the compensation trends and even workers' rights and well being in those countries. So, some countries, for example, in China or some of the other Southeast Asian countries, the platform fees are highly regulated. They cannot just charge any amount from the workers. In Europe, there are government measures to ensure that the platform fees are restricted. But in India, we are still not reached there fully. Government is trying to bring about a certain wage code, I mean, a social security code, etc. And that the discussions are going how we can ensure platform fees are regulated, minimum wage is ensured, or other benefits and protections, social securities are provided to these workers. So these are in very nascent and early stages in some countries, whereas in other countries it's already there. France, as a country, they classify, they ensure that the workers, the gig workers, are also given a minimum wage. So, country to country, also, these differences are there. And how we ensure that we don't allow too much gap and disparity is a legislative measure. And I'm sure the unions of all these workers' unions will strive hard to ensure such unwanted things are not crept into the system.
Perfect. There are so many areas left untouched in the gig economy, but somewhere, we kind of we run out of time. That's why, we have to kind of end today's podcast, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
you were informing us something really crucial. But again, we have time constraints, so definitely we'll kind of learn more about it in the upcoming podcast. So we have arrived at the end of today's podcast. What message would you like to give to our listeners? And additionally, for those keen on staying connected with you beyond this podcast, could you please share how they can reach out to you?
Sure. So, My suggestion to everybody who is listening to this and who are particularly gig workers is the future of gig economy is very promising. We are in a very fascinating and dynamic space, and it's all shaped by primarily the workers collective and the legislative measures that different governments are taking, and the innovative ways the platforms are trying to reward people. So we are in a very interesting space and time when it comes to gig economy and gig workers. Nobody can ignore this huge workforce across the globe, and I'm sure the regulatory measures and provisions and platforms has to take care of the well-being and wellness of the workers. They cannot ignore this huge group. So future is bright, and I hope we have more regulatory measures and codes of social security, everything in place very soon, so that more gig workers are benefited quickly, and we don't have any mishaps just because somebody chooses to have a flexible working style. And to reach me, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can connect me on my LinkedIn account. My email ID is par.kpra@gmail.com, and we can connect over LinkedIn.
Great. I'm sure our listeners will connect with you post this podcast. Parvathy, thank you so much for joining in today. We are very grateful to have you, and thank you for sharing your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and I'm so humbled to have been part of this conversation and to have got this opportunity with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.